Hello everyone, my name is Vadim Voskresensky. I'm a PhD student at Free University of Berlin and I'm working as a researcher at Weizenbaum Institute for the Network Society. And today I want to present you results on my project dedicated to German right-wing online communities on Russian social media. Some words about the context. From the recent research, we know that social media platforms play a very important role for right-wingers for different countries. They allow them to create ties with each other, to spread the narratives, and to just just to create communicative spaces for different discussions and interactions. At the same time, the proponents of radical right ideas, they face different restrictions and challenges of these platforms. For instance, deplatforming in the case when the page of a community of a user is completely banned on the platform, and also censorship. To overcome these restrictions, right-wing users develop different tactics, and one of this tactic is digital migration to the platforms that are characterized by less strict moderation and censorship policies. For instance, one of these platforms is Russian social networking site VK-Kontakte. And in this research, in this study, I'm focusing on the German right-wingers moving to this Russian social networking platform. I'm looking at this community through the perspective of country publics. This theory was developed by Nancy Fraser, and by country publics, she understood marginalized groups that are excluded from dominant discourse, and they also try to challenge this dominant discourse. The theory of Nancy Fraser paved the way to many studies that explore how oppressed groups use the affordances of social media platforms to reach their inward and outward oriented goals. By inward oriented goals, researchers understand the cases when the affordances of social media platforms are used to create alternative communicative spaces, safe spaces where the users can develop and maintain their collective identities. At the same time, outward-oriented goals is about spreading the counter-narratives to challenge dominant discourse. And also the research shows that counter-publics is not always about progressive and democratic ideals. It's also about groups and users that have quite radical right and radical left agenda. That's what we are studying, that's what I'm studying in this research. Research questions. First of all, I'm trying to understand which online groups do German right-wingers create on Russian social media platform VK, and what are the characteristics of these groups. By characteristic, I mean the activity of these groups, the ways how they communicate, if they communicate and interact with other audiences at the platform. And we know that counter-publics they're based on issues and themes that concern the members of counter-publics. So in the second research question, I'm trying to understand which issues are discussed by German radical right counter-publics on VK. And also I'm trying to understand what is the structure of counter-publics. Do they cluster in like smaller counter-publics based on different issues, or it's rather overarching counter-publics that are like focused on the same issue? Some words about data methods. To collect the groups, I used snowball sampling. Initially, I had the list of prominent right-wing actors in Germany, political parties, politicians, and alternative media outlets. So first of all, I collected groups that have the names of these actors in the titles, and afterwards, based on reposts, based on the pages of the most active participants, I collected other groups. I did the same with left and centrist actors in Germany, just to understand if the using of VK is a common feature for all German speaking users, regardless of their political attitudes, or it's rather a specific feature for proponents of radical right ideas. Afterwards, I collected all text data from these online groups, and I applied correlated topic modeling to comments from these groups to identify issues discussed in them. To find the structure of counterpublics, then I applied hierarchical clustering to the output of topic modeling. Yeah, topic modeling was set to find 20 topics. So first of all, yes, I would say that German-speaking digital environment is mostly represented by users having radical right views. I didn't find a lot of groups of left or centrist actors, and these groups are found. They are completely inactive. They have very small number of participants comparing to right-wing groups. At the same time, German right-wing environment has very heterogeneous structure, including groups supporting political actors and movements, groups of alternative media and blogs, and groups without any affiliation. And at the same time, I need to say that these groups are not so active in terms of interaction. Like they publish a lot of posts, but participants are not so involved in discussing these posts. In most of the groups, not all of the groups, but in most of the groups, number of comments is much smaller than number of posts. Speaking about some other words about activity of German right-wing groups and the content they produce, I need to say that in most of the biggest part of the content in these groups is just taken from other external sources. It's just news stories from other alternative or mainstream media. So they're just rather archiving these news stories for discussions. Yeah, we already know that discussions are not very active, but still they don't produce a lot of original content. Also, they're not very active in reposting. I found that they have reposts, and most of these reposts, they go to other German right-wing groups. At the same time, they don't tend to communicate and interact with other audiences at VK. Speaking about issues, speaking about themes discussed in these groups, not surprisingly, the most prominent topics, it's traditional populist radical right narratives with the criticism of immigration, of established politicians, and mainstream media. But at the same time, we can see some interesting new narratives that were not explored in the previous research. For instance, topic 7, censorship and moderation on Facebook. So that's a topic that unites the posts where users exchange their experiences with being deplatformed, with being censored, and develop different tactics how to overcome these challenges. Afterwards, I clustered my data and I found 3 big clusters. And in this picture, on x-axis, we can see our topics I found, identified with help of correlated topic modeling, and on y-axis, difference between probability of this topic for the current cluster and the proportion of this topic in whole distribution that is not separated into clusters. And I would say that, yeah, we can see 3 main clusters. The first one is, like, in this cluster, the most prominent topics are about right-wing populism, as I said earlier, about immigration, politicians, etc. There is second cluster that is based mostly on conspiracies, and what is more interesting, the groups in this cluster, they are less interested in internal domestic German politics and immigration. They are rather discussing conspiracy theories about Russian government, about United States, like deep state, Donald Trump, and also definitely one of the important themes, it's conspiracy against conspiracies of Jews, how they manage all the world. And the third cluster is censorship, and I think it's one of the most interesting things. So you can see here the most prominent topic is 7, about censorship. So for these groups, it's 23 groups in this cluster, the criticism of Facebook and discussing of different ways how to overcome this restriction at Facebook is the most important narrative. So, and here I present the main, the most important results in my research. First, as I said, the groups are not very active, and they So, and based on that, I would say that I think these groups, it's not main communicative spaces of joint right fingers. It's rather backups. So they use these groups to create symbolic infrastructure. They carry some narratives from other platforms to have like backup in the case if they will be deplatformed or censored at big social media platforms. The same thing was explored by the Cook in her dissertation about the communities on Reddit. Also, we can see that the groups don't have outward-oriented goals. They are mostly focused on, I would say, uh, inward-oriented goals. It can be, I didn't explore it deeply, what is that exactly, but definitely they are not so interested in communicating with other audiences. And the explanation is quite simple. They don't try to communicate with other audiences because the hegemonic mainstream discourse is not present on VK, because most of the users of VK is the citizens of post-Soviet countries, and they are not so interested in German politics. And also interesting finding is definitely the third cluster I found. So we can see that there is completely new narrative, and for some groups this narrative is the most prevalent. So these groups, they are not united, these members of these groups are not united on the base of criticism to immigration, to politicians. For them, main external enemy is big social media platforms that probably deplatformed them at some point. So it's interesting how the narratives of discussion of the right wingers changes for these groups that migrated to Russian social media platforms. That's it. I will be glad to answer all your questions. Thanks for your attention, and see you at ECPR.